In this video, we're going to be continuing to install our browser phone, but this time we're going to be using PJSIP. Why? Well, support for ChanSIP is soon going to be end of life, and most of the development is on PJSIP. So, if you want to know how to install a browser phone using PJSIP, stick around. Hey there guys, thanks again for joining me. My name is Conrad de Vet and this is Innovate Asterisk. So, if you watched the first video, you saw how to install a browser phone using ChanSIP as the channel driver. Now, as I said earlier, it's going to be end of life soon. PJSIP really is where all the development is happening. Now, if you are on ChanSIP, you're absolutely fine and you can continue to do that. But if you're considering upgrading or changing to PJSIP, then this is the video to watch. I'm going to show you how to install the browser phone with the PJSIP engine. Now, there's a couple of things that change with that. Asterisk 13 is no longer suitable for what we want to do. There are a number of things where PJSIP on Asterisk 13 didn't perform correctly, and that was with the inviting of the call. It would always invite with video enabled, and that confused the call answer environment where it would offer to answer with video. Now, if you took away the video codecs, yes, then it didn't offer the call with video, but we do want video codecs. There wasn't really a way to offer according to the way the original call was invited. So, changing to Asterisk 16 solved all that. It appears that PJSIP on Asterisk 16 is much more compatible with the old ChanSIP of Asterisk 13, and it works perfectly with the browser phone. So, if you're following along and you've watched the first video, Asterisk 13 was used as the source code to download. Now we're going to use Asterisk 16. The way you install it is exactly the same, except instead of using Asterisk 13 current, we're going to be using Asterisk 16 current. Okay, so at this point, you should have completed the following things. Download and installed Asterisk 16. Built the certificates with the CA root. Install the configuration files from the Github project into the Asterisk folder and put the static HTTP pages in static HTTP. If you've got to that point, then you can follow on from here. Right, let's have a look at the configuration files that you did download from Git, and then we're going to restart Asterisk and check if everything is all right. So under the modules.conf, I'm going to now disable ChanSIP. So this is the point where you want to not load SIP, you want to allow PJSIP to load. So you just say no load ChanSIP. That's what you put in there. Now, the one slightly annoying configuration is this config wizard. Now, if you don't load it, then it prevents quite a lot of logging onto the screen. So I'm disabling it now, but if you are using config wizards, please leave that to load. And in this example, I'm not using config wizards, so I'm going to put a no load onto it, and then it's not going to output too much onto the screen for us. It's a bit annoying and it's confusing. So I'm putting that in there as a no load. I'm also not loading ChanSIP. So after restarting Asterisk, ChanSIP will not be there. Right, let's have a look at http.conf, and under http.conf, we're going to put a very familiar configuration in. This is pretty much the same as Asterisk 13. I am going to run 443, so I'm just making that change over there. So that's the bind address, IP4, any IP on 443. I have a TLS enabled, yes. There's my certs, which I generated in the previous video. So if you're unfamiliar with how to generate those certificates, please have a look at that video. I've upped my session limit to 1,000. I've enabled static because that is of course where the files are being hosted. Right, now that I've done that, I've still got PJSIP and extensions, but I want to reload Asterisk to check that my ports are loaded. So let's go back here. So I want to go sudo service asterisk restart. That should be restarting our Asterisk service right now. And then I want to run the following command, which you saw in the previous video, kind of a helpful command, and that is netstat -tulpn, and it will show us what ports are listening and what apps are using them. So Asterisk has port 443, TCP port 443. That is our mini web hosting and /WebSockets connection. There's Asterisk running on TCP port 5060. Remember, according to our transport definition in our PJSIP file. So if you have a look here, PJSIP, which would have downloaded in the Github project, would have set up these transport types over here. I've got TCP, WebSockets, and UDP. Okay, so those are the transport types over there, and that is what we're seeing over here. 5060 and TCP, and UDP 5060 will be somewhere in here as well. There you go. UDP 5060 also running off Asterisk. Okay, so we can now see that our Asterisk box is advertising or has the correct ports open according to our configuration, which we have loaded here. So I already switched over to the PJSIP file, and I want to go through that with you. Now, PJSIP.conf is set up in this case largely the same as SIP.conf in the previous video. So I've got a couple of things under global, okay, and as I already mentioned, in order to work with PJSIP, you have to set up various transport blocks, transport options over here. These context blocks over here, it says that type transport. So by setting this up, you're effectively telling the system that you want to be able to work over TCP, over WebSockets, and over UDP. If you, for example, take one of these blocks out, then you're disabling WebSockets, your installation of Asterisk. Okay, I don't want to. I want them in, and I want it bound to any IP address. Now, it already knows all the other bits and pieces about it. You don't have to specify anything else. You just have to tell it the protocol and the bind. So type transport, and then here you can see I've added a TOS and a COS for type UDP. Remember, these two packet markers are only useful on UDP packets, so I've included that over there. Other information which we've just carried over from SIP.conf. Then ACL, so pretty similar to SIP.conf, we also had an ACL section. All right, now you do actually get an ACL.conf, but for simplicity, I'm including it in here. It doesn't have anything other than a type ACL definition over here, and that tells it that almost effectively all PJSIP traffic now conforms to this ACL definition. So it will deny all traffic from everywhere, but permit on these local network classes, which basically means our PJSIP traffic is going to only work over the local network. Right? This is something which I do want to define because our PBX is sitting locally within our network, and I don't want it to be accessible from anywhere outside of our network. If you are, of course, working on a hosted box, then you will have to make additional definitions inside your configurations. Then I've got templates, much the same as the templates in SIP.conf, okay, except they have slightly different structures. So I still define a template with the exclamation mark over here to the right of the block, and I have some new things now. So I've got something called an AOR. Now that is typically your sort of effectively your contact. That's your reachable point. Okay. Now I'm only using a single contact, remember, because in this case, I'm using extensions. One extension, the other extension, and they will only ever really have one contact address. In other words, where is extension 100 or extension 200 or whatever it is? So I'm removing the existing contact that might be there already. If, for example, I'm registering over an existing registration, and I'm giving it a qualified frequency of 120 seconds. So for 2 minutes, it's going to, every 2 minutes, it's going to send an options packet. That's essentially what the qualify frequency does. Then under this block here, it's actually an auth type block. You'll notice that I don't have the type equals over here in my templates. All of these templates don't have the type equals. All of these have type equals. It's a requirement of PJSIP now that if you have a context block, you have to give it a type. But if you have a template, then you don't give it a type, or I haven't in this case. Now it is possible to, but there was a bug with one of the types which didn't allow you to use it in the template. So I'm using it in the actual user definitions and not in the templates. So I've got basically my auth where I'm specifying my auth type is username and password. So that's how I want to auth my user extensions. I want to give them a username and password, which is similar to the way a lot of people are working. And then under a basic endpoint and a phone endpoint, okay, and a WebRTC endpoint, I'm going to have a similar sort of structure to what I had previously on SIP.conf. So all extensions are basic endpoints. Then I either add a phone or a WebRTC template. And as you can see, I disallow all in my basic endpoint, and I allow the codec and all the WebRTC stuff in this case over there. So I will show you how to make a basic user now. So I'm going to go down to users and I'm going to add a user. Now the way this works is when I have a user block like I had before, it doesn't necessarily define the username anymore, right? We actually have to supply it with a username and a password now. All right, so this user1 is only specified as user1 because I want to call it something consistent with my naming conventions. So naming conventions really do become quite important now. So I'm saying user1 is one of my users of my extensions. Okay, I'm giving it a type endpoint. You see now I have type endpoint specified here, where these endpoint templates, you see I've actually used a naming convention underscore endpoint to give myself the hint that these are endpoint templates. They're going to be used in endpoint templates. So I've got user1 type endpoint, okay, and I'm supplying it with the template basic template, and then I'm also supplying it with WebRTC endpoint. So by including that line over there, we're actually including that setting and that setting. And by adding this type endpoint there makes this user1 into a complete endpoint. Now, again, like SIP.conf, the kind of information I want under my user block is going to be really the information that is specific to this user. And I have my caller ID with my DID specified, okay? And I've got my auth and my AORs over here. Again, this might look confusing, but take a second. I'm saying my auth is user1. And where do I have a type auth? Well, there I have one over here. I say user1, which is referring to that actual string text over there, is of type auth. Well, which template is it using? Well, it's using user pass auth, which is over there. And again, I've used the underscore auth to indicate to myself that it's an auth template. And I'm saying, well, actually all I'm doing is specifying the auth type. So that setting gets brought in by this through the template. And then I'm saying username is user1, and password is 123. Then I'm going to AORs, and I'm also saying is equal to user1. So don't get confused by this. You are allowed to specify exactly the same context block in PJSIP.conf so long as you have a different type underneath it, right? And I generally, as a rule of thumb, like to stick to the very next line being the type equals, because if you put it further down, you might miss that piece of information when you're looking over there. So by including those three things each time, I'm able to consistently set my settings of my different configuration blocks. So I'm saying user1 of type AOR is using this single AOR template. Let's have a look. Single AOR. Well, I've got max context 1, I've got qualify frequency 120, and remove existing contact. So then I can specify other specific information to this user at this point over here. I can, for example, include a mailbox. Actually, I'm going to take out the mailbox because I actually haven't set up user 1 mailbox. So let me leave that off for a second. So here is my user 1. Now, as you can imagine, making user 2, I would change user 2, user 2, user 2, user 2, user 2, user 2. So let's go and put user 2 in. Right, so I am going to copy user 2 across. Right, so there you go. Exactly the same, just 2 over there. Makes it nice and easy from a copy and paste perspective. Right, let's add a few more. I'm going to add Safari, and I'm going to add Firefox, because I can show you that all of these different things. In fact, let me add all of the ones I have here ready-made, and I should have user 6 and user 3. Where's user 3? Firefox. No, Yearlink. All right. So I have now created all of these users. These are effectively extensions. These are the people within my organization. You can see it's nice and neat. Each block is a user. Each block has a unique username and password. Don't use password 123, and especially don't use password 123 if you're hosting your box live. That would be inviting trouble. Username 2, that's also a secret piece of information which you don't divulge to anybody unless you're typing those details into a phone or something like that. Right, and I have my original user 1, which is Conrad extension 100. Please always specify your DID, your reachable DID over there. Remember, I always like to use numerical DIDs for everything. I find it difficult to type in a worded username in something like a Yearlink T48S. I prefer to use the keypad. So if I can reach somebody as 300, I just type 300 on the keypad of the phone and it rings on their desk. Right, so that is pjsip.conf done. The one other thing I want to point out to you here is that I have taken Opus out of the allow codecs. What that's going to mean is that WebRTC is now going to operate on the next available codec for audio, which is ULAW, right? So there you go. That's ULAW now. I have VP9, VP8, and H.264. So something that was happening in Asterisk 13 with PJSIP is that it wasn't able to negotiate any of these video codecs. Now, video is always in pass-through, so it cannot transcode any video at any point. Two people have to have matching codecs. And what was happening in something like Safari is Safari only supports VP8, but this phone, whichever phone it was that was phoning it, supported VP9. Now it couldn't negotiate a codec that is compatible with both. So what would happen is video would appear from one side and not the other. All right, but in Asterisk 16, it solves all of that and we can get proper video codec negotiation. So I've changed over now to my extensions.conf, and your extensions.conf, as you know, is your dial plan. So let's have a look at what changes in the dial plan. I'm going to copy that over and paste it in. Now I'm going to go back up to the top. So first thing you'll notice is that I've used go sub. So what happens there? Now what happened is that by default in Asterisk 16, in the menu select, the macro function has been disabled by default. It's not really a bad thing. As I said in the previous video, under Asterisk 13, you could still freely use macros, but they have a limitation in their stack size. They can only be called upon themselves 7 times. Although some of the other functionality about them, the fact that they return automatically, things like that are useful. But then again, GoSub can be programmed to return, or it can be programmed to not return. In fact, in this situation, the not returning is being used most of the time. So this GoSub for text messages right? Send text is now just plain send text. I don't type macro send text. You'll see I've just got a context block send text. So that is the context that gets executed when I call this go sub. But it does take 2 extra parameters, which I find a little annoying. In order to call this function, I have to add 2 more parameters. That is the extension and the priority. So I go to S1, which is send text S1, right? That is the line which I start this go sub on. It's kind of nice that you can start a go sub on a different context and a different extension and a different priority, but in a lot of the cases I don't use that. Now parameters are slightly different in that the parameters must be inside your brackets over here. So I must put user1, which is what I'm passing to this go sub context. I now can still pick up as arg1, but arg1 is only that when I've got it inside a bracket. I can add more by putting another argument in there. I need a comma to separate them. They still sit inside the brackets. These are my send text mappings for each of the DIDs. If I send text to extension 100, it sends to user 1. So this is just a basic mapping which we covered in the previous video, and the same with my hints, except you'll notice something here. My technology, the part before the /, my technology is now PJSIP. So remember that was SIP / user1. Now it's PJSIP / user1. There again, I've got some feature codes. Now I've got go sub music on hold without a parameter. So there is my music on hold context over there, and that's how I call it. Remember, none of these are returning because after music on hold, that's the end of the call. So I don't need to return this function at all. In other words, it's going to exit my go sub, going to end here, and that's the end of my dial plan for this call. In this go sub over here, I'm dialing extension. Dial extension is over here now, not macro dial extension, just straight dial extension. Okay, passing arg1 again, like that, exactly the same as the text messaging. However, I've added something here. Now, PJSIP doesn't have native jitter buffer built into its config, so you have to set it up in the dial plan, and that's what I've added here. Jitter buffer, I've just put an adaptive default one. You're not going to see much because we are in fact on a local LAN, so there won't be a lot of space for jitter buffer. If you don't want it, you don't have to have it. You can switch it off. All right, because this is an extension to an extension environment. It's going to depend on whether there is limited or low bandwidth between your endpoints. So I'm just going to leave it on for the moment. And there's another important change. When I dial as PJSIP / the user that I pass through from this parameter here. I'm still giving it a 30-second timeout. That's exactly the same. The dial command is exactly the same, just the technology / in the beginning must change to PJSIP. Then send text, which we covered over here, which is the macro that we call, the go sub that we called, now has got a small update. Now, it turns out that the handling of from in PJSIP is slightly more, let's say, sensitive. It must be let's call it a fully qualified SIP URI. So it must say SIP : and then it must be the number that you are calling from, and then the rest of the URL. Then again, we do need to specify the technology that we're going to be transporting this message on. So PJSIP : and then the destination, which comes through from arg1, which we know as from the mapping, right? Remember that when we send a text, we map a DID to a user1, right? And that's what comes in there. The from is then pulled from all this information over here. So a lot of that is just to work out what the SIP from is. So who the person is sending this message from, because the from will be a user name, and we want to turn it into a caller ID. So this asterisk now calls rx PJSIP show endpoint and then the peer, and then we clean it up and we get all the information out of it, and that's what we can display over here. So you've done all that and you've set up your configuration as such. I'm going to give it one last restart, and then I'm going to say sudo asterisk -r to enter. Okay, and I'm going to show you just a couple of commands inside here. If I hit tab, you should see that there is no SIP inside here. I cannot type SIP anything. Okay, there will be PJSIP now. PJSIP, what are the options? I've got show. So on show, well, here's all the various different things, and the endpoints are the ones that are really interesting to us. So I'm saying show endpoints. And here you can see my users that are set up. User. All right. Now if I go PJSIP show endpoint and then use user1 as an argument, then I get the full list of all the different things that I can see in that endpoint, including my codecs, my caller ID, as I loaded it into that system, including our certificates and all the different things about that extension. This is much more extensive than the sip.conf. So if you followed everything, you should be seeing something similar to this. Now, you can just reload the URL if you're following from one video to the next, remembering that all the settings get carried over by this URL. So if you first did the asterisk 13 video and now doing this asterisk 16 with PJSIP, you'll find that your same browser phone session loads exactly the same. And that's what I've got here. I had previously set this up for the previous video. Changing over to asterisk 16 changes nothing from the browser side, right? So I still have the same configuration. All the settings here are the same. Raspberry Pi.local 443 WebSockets. My extension is 100. My user 1. Under audio video, let's just go and make sure I've got some settings correctly here. So that's fine. I'm going to listen with my Samsung. Here we go. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Under appearance, I can choose a file. So put that in. Notifications, still fine. Need to allow. Right, so music on hold. Again, I can put a music on hold image. All right, you can make this as fancy as you like. I'm leaving it as is for now. So I can test music on hold now. Right, there you go. Ringing. Call in progress. So we have music on hold. Let's go and have a look what that looks like in the dial plan. So over in the dial plan, you'll see over here, this is the area of interest that we have. And what's happening is that it's going to this from extensions concept directly off the endpoint. So if I show you how that is called, what happens is on PJSIP endpoint section, basic endpoint, all have got context from extensions. Basic endpoints, essentially what we're calling. We're going to from extensions directly off dialing from that extension. So from extensions is here, much the same as it is asterisk 13. And it's going to match based on the number I dialed. Star 65, I dialed that number. So then it matches it and says go sub. So let's have a look at what go sub does. Music on hold S1. So what you should see here is executing S at MOH:1. So that's literally doing exactly what we said. Go to music on hold S1. So at executing S at music on hold :1 says no op. And then it says music on hold. Well, did it do that? Let's double check. Go down to music on hold. No up, music on hold. Well, that sounds just about perfect. Okay, ringing. So it's sent a ringing, wait 2 seconds, answer, and answered the call. There you go, setting up the streams. And then wait 1 second and music on hold. So that's our little pause that we get. After the answer, just have a small pause, 1 second, and start playing music on hold. So there you go. That's what we're doing now. So in the music on hold is playing, what can we do? So when music on hold is playing, well, we can record it. So now I have a recording over here, starting the recording. I can change devices over here. As you can see, when I pull this up, it allows me to change my microphone and speakers and my camera even. And under call status, or call stats, I get my kilobits per second. Now you will notice something here. We are in fact using ULAW codec. One thing you'll know about the ULAW codec is that it's always sending at 60 kilobits per second. Yeah, here's 50 packets per second and 60 kilobits per second. So it is doing exactly what it said it would do, and that's because we're using the ULAW codec. Down here, 64 kilobits per second, 50 packets per second. We're not getting any packet loss, I should hope not. It's over the local LAN. And the jitter is also going to be nothing. Again, what we want. We're receiving audio, it's going up and down. It's the actual soundtrack that we're hearing, sort of plotted out graphically. Okay, so that's all I can do. I cannot transfer a music on hold call. I can conference in somebody, but I don't really have anybody conference in. Oh, there's somebody on. So let's say 300. That's my desk phone. So I'm going to call that person. I'm going to answer it. Let me put it on speakerphone. So I've put it on speakerphone, and then I've said join conference. Right, now we're all in a conference. So the call has come through to my Yearlink. There you go. That's very bright, but there it is. There's the call through to the Yearlink, and I can end the call. There you go, ended the conference call. Once it creates a call CDR, I can listen to the call recording like this. Starting the recording. Okay, pause it. I won't have scrub because the file is actually streamed through, but it gives me a few additional pieces of information. It's 1.8 megabytes. Codec is Opus codec. So WebM audio Opus. So it in fact records it in Opus. It's just that it's not going to be able to use it through Asterisk. So what I've done now is I have loaded Safari on the side here and Chrome on the side. So here I am 400 Safari, and this is my 100 over here, and I can see my presence over there, and for that will be this one. So if I phone from here to there, I'll be able to answer the call, right? So I can answer the call. Now it might echo, so I'm gonna just mute the one. In fact, I'll mute both. Okay, so it might echo, but there you go. Call in progress, no problems. So the one thing that you will notice is that when I call, if anybody noticed something that was missing there, let's mute that and mute that. I have no record button. I can record the call here, but I can't record here. Now what happens is that Safari is a little bit behind. They use the WebKit engine, while Chrome uses the Blink engine. So that's Chrome, Opera, and Microsoft Edge all use the Blink engine. So they will all be on the same sort of set of capabilities. However, Safari, a little bit behind here. Now, you can go up here to develop and go down to experimental features and enable media recorder over here. So I'm actually going to do that. It's in that call. Probably need to refresh that. and then start it again. Answer. Right, so now, switch that off. So now I have record, start recording. So it does say it's executing it, except there's only one problem, and that is, if I end the call and try and play this back, it's really quite garbled. It even stores it as video MP4, so I'm really not sure what Safari are doing here, and it does mark it as experimental, so clearly they have a little bit further to go. Right, next I'm going to show you there's a small issue with video. So I can call on a video call to this person. Here you can see my answer with video appears, so I can answer it with video. I'm going to have to mute it again. So there you go, mute. All right, now I can use the sketch facility. So I can sketch something and I can send that sketch through and it updates correctly. So every time I finish drawing a line, then it goes through. See that? I can also present my screen. So I can present my screen, except it always presents my primary screen and it doesn't appear to give me an option to change that screen. So something which is a little bit of a concern with regards to Safari and screen sharing. I call that a limitation, all right? But switching back, I can go back to my preview, but it doesn't again start my preview. So that's another little limitation of Safari. I can go back to sketch and that's fine. I can sketch, I can present my screen. The other thing that's not working at the moment is if I choose my file and try and present a video, it plays here by clicking the play button, which is not also what it's supposed to do, but it doesn't play through onto the other side. By contrast, if I did the same thing on Chrome, if I choose a file and use sample video and use the same one, it plays through correctly. Okay, so that is something of a limitation on Safari and on Firefox. They seem to have the same behavior. Other than that, normal things like text sending will work. I can even send my emojis. So if I want to send evil face, then I can send it and it works fine. And reply is the same as well. So there you go. Asterisk 16 with PJSIP. Remembering that Asterisk 13 PJSIP doesn't really work so well, so I wouldn't really do it that way, but there is a working solution. So feel free to send me some comments in the comment section below or in the GitHub Project page. If there is an issue or something that is not working, please feel free to join me there, because I want to improve this product to suit everybody's needs. And if there's anything you want to see in the project, please let me know. If you're struggling with how to set it up and get started, also use the GitHub project page or YouTube comment section. Subscribe to the channel, like it, dislike it, however you feel about the video. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.